Well, hello and welcome to a very special episode of the FQ Show this week. I'm joined here by Ryan Fett, the General Manager for Strategy and Participation here at FQ. But also, more importantly, I'm joined here today by the big man himself, James Johnson, CEO of Football Australia. James, Ryan, how are we today?
I'm great, and it's very good to be here.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Great to be here, Carl. Good to have a chat.
Thank you. So, James, what brings you to Queensland? What's your visit about here?
We're here on a broader strategy that we're rolling out at the moment, which is community visits. It was part of the vision set in 2020, where we can get into the field, speak with our members, staff and executives, our football community, listen to clubs directly around what the challenges are, volunteers. And for us, this is a really important time to be coming to Queensland. One, because we can get here because the borders are open, but also because of the floods that have occurred in the state of Queensland. We want to be here and see football being started again, football being played again, but also listen to the many volunteers who've spent many hours over the last months, not only dealing with football, but also getting the sport up and running again as a result of COVID. And that's why we're here, Cal.
Yeah, fantastic. As a lot of you may have been aware, over the last sort of 2 years, I'd say, Football Queensland has actually undergone a recent future of football reform process. Ryan, what have been some of the achievements as a result of this reform process?
Yeah, look, Carl, it's been a really exhaustive 2-year process, I guess, that the Football Queensland board and staff have gone on with the football community. It's very much positioned ourselves, I guess, for the future opportunities that the game can present itself to Queenslanders ultimately. I guess to narrow it down really quickly for you in terms of the outcomes for us, there was 3 main things that were driving us around this. It was around localised delivery, and we've done that by ensuring a certain standard of service that we provide in each of the regions across the state, be it technical, administrative, or through referee and coaching. There was also then a regionalised authority component to that. Again, this was never about centralising, I guess, all the control and decisions in a Brisbane office. The things were happening in Cairns and Townsville. So it was really about making sure we have that regionalised presence and that local touch point in terms of how we make decisions for clubs and councils and all those sorts of stakeholders that we have across the regions. And then obviously some of the stuff we were able to create some really strong economies of scale, things that can be done almost anywhere, would be accounting processes or marketing processes, HR, those sorts of things, where we were duplicating a lot of those systems across the state, and this has enabled us, I guess, to come together and create some synergies and some I guess efficiencies in those areas. And I guess it came around the 4 core pillars that we did around that as well. So we looked at governance reform, we looked at administrative reform, we looked at competition reform, and we also looked at affordability of the game. So, and we've been able to deliver on all of those through things like the connected pyramid of football, as well as a reduction in the governing body fees that we've been able to put through 2022. So in a nutshell, that's a real essence of, I guess, of what we've done over the last sort of 18 to 2 years. Yeah,
fantastic. And I speak for myself, it's been a bit of a wild ride across all that, but it's been positive for the game in Queensland here. It's been a good change that has been needed to happen. So it was quite good. Obviously, since 2020, we've been affected by COVID and, as you said, the floods as well. But we've still managed to grow in participation numbers, player numbers, referee numbers, coaching numbers. What do you make of these Queensland successes? And how good has that been for us and overall for the game?
Yeah, so Queensland, if we look at it from a national perspective, it's an absolutely key part of the total pie. We've been very happy to see a lot of change that's been driven across Queensland, and Queensland has chosen to focus on governance and administration, and that's been great. We're happy to see that there are football KPIs that are being achieved as a result of this governance change, and I think there's some learnings that other parts of the country can take in the right context in their respective jurisdictions.
Yeah, the board was really strong, I guess, in terms of the 3-year strategic cycle that we went on around our key sort of deliverables around participation and what that sort of looked like in growing the game. And we've been able to deliver on many of those through making sure that we've made decisions to invest in the right parts of the game, coach education, referee development and the like. And our women and girls numbers continue to grow as we head towards what will be an exciting 12 months ahead with Women's World Cup as well. So
absolutely. One of the things you're looking to bring in to fruition is the one football model. Would you be able to explain a little bit about that to our viewers?
Sure, Cal. So we've got to put this in context. In 2020, we talked about a new vision for the sport. We call it the 11 Principles. One of those principles was around a governance transformation across the country, and this is part of a 15-year vision. So it's not something that needs to happen tomorrow, but it's something that we need to evolve across the country. Right now, we are at the back end of a process that we're going through with all of our 9 member federations at the moment. We're focused on strategy because we believe that strategy needs to be first and then governance needs to follow strategy. For the first time in the code's history, we believe by July, we're going to have an aligned strategy between FA and the member federations that we can roll out throughout the country. That's really important for the sport. So that's the first area of One Football. We're also working together with the member federations on centralising certain commercial deals so that we can create more value for the entire country and ensure that more investment is going back into local football so that some of the football KPIs that Ryan mentioned before become better achievable. So the commercial element is the second area. We're also looking at digital. So there have been challenges over the past 4 or 5 years with registration systems across the country. Again, we have good alignment between FA and the member federations around digital. So that is an ongoing process as well. And we're going to see in one state, in Queensland, but also in Victoria, that we'll be rolling out pilots in the mini-roo space at the back end of this year. We're also starting a conversation with our member federations around potential governance administrative changes on a national level. So we're at the start of that journey, but that's a fourth line of One Football. But we're right at the start of that journey, and that's a conversation that we're having with the 9 member federations. It'll be a process where we put ideas on the table, but we need to have a good discussion so we can come up with a model that is not one size fits all, but something that can be, on one hand, uniformly applied, but can also take into regard the specifics of each part of the country. So that's what we mean in the context of the 11 principles when we talk about One Football.
Yeah. And specifically for Queensland, what would this bring to the participants, both the clubs themselves, the players and the volunteers? What would this bring to them?
Well, I think the changes that Queensland have gone through, which we backed certainly last year when they were put in place, was it allows us as administrators to be closer to those on the ground, the volunteers, the participants and the clubs. And that, in a nutshell, is why we're here, right? Because together with Football Queensland, we want to hear the voice of those that make the game work on the ground. I think that that's really at the heart of the changes that happened here in Queensland.
Yeah, 100%. The process that we've gone through is one that's been fully in partnership with FA, hand in hand, I guess, through this whole journey. And it's all about creating outcomes and what are best footballing outcomes for our participants and the game itself. That's always forefront of our mind, and that's the question we always come back to is what's going to be benefit for football long term and what does that need to be? So as James sort of said, it's about finding synergies, about finding commercial realities, economies of scale and all those sorts of things that can make sure that the game is able to prosper moving forward.
Fantastic. You've gone through sort of 2 major projects that feed into this One Football model. I'll touch on the first one now, is the national transfer system. Could you give us a little bit of background on that and the change that has happened recently and why that change has been important?
So again, it's like the One Football discussion. The transfer system is another principle in the 11 principles. So this is a really key part for football development across the country. Transfer systems exist in most of the world, particularly the developed nations. So we're working through a process at the moment where we're implementing in different waves, different measures that create a transfer system. So what we're trying to do at the end of the day, the objective of a transfer system is really twofold. There's a sporting side and an economical side. On the sporting side, at its heart, it is putting player development at the very heart of the system. So what we want to do is incentivise clubs all over the country, not just in the A-Leagues, but in the NPLs and also the clubs beneath, to focus their strategies around the development of players. And if we can do that at large scale across the country, we will be one of the top football nations around the world in terms of players moving abroad and playing in the biggest leagues, but also the performance of our national teams. There's an economical element as well, because in a transfer system, the value of retaining players is elevated. That doesn't happen here in Australia at the moment, but by bringing a transfer system, you will, which will mean that clubs, if they set their strategies right, will be able to generate revenues through the movement of players. And that's something that is certainly an opportunity and a hole, I think, that we've got here in Australia. What we've done to date is we've put out a white paper. We put it out about 15 months ago, which was very dense. We've gone through a lot of consultation since then with our member federations, with the A-League clubs, with the players themselves through the PFA, but also directly with our football community through different surveys. We have lifted a transfer fee cap that existed for all clubs that sat outside of the A-League. So what that means now is effectively it is a free market. If a player is under contract and is registered with a competition administrator and a player moves between the term of the player's contract, there is a fee that clubs can ask for when that player would leave the club. We're also looking to bring in what's called a training compensation system. This would be where players move under the age of 21 outside of contracts. There would be a payment that would go back to the club that had trained the player. And ultimately, that's about ensuring that clubs, if they're going to invest in youth development, in player development, that they're compensated for doing so. Because ultimately, as I said earlier, the system is really about awarding clubs who train and develop players. There will be other mechanisms that we start talking about. We're going to talk about loans. We're going to talk about agent regulations. And of course, we already have transfer windows that were put in place 12 months. So that is what a transfer system is. And this is certainly something that we think will be of benefit to the game going forward.
Yeah, 100%. I think that movement of players and that, I guess, holding on to development of players over a period of time is something that clubs have struggled with at a state level and sort of below, I guess, over the last many years since the implementation of NPLs and things. And the training compensation, while in place, probably hasn't worked as well as we would have hoped in that sort of setting. But moving forward, I think the framework and the structure that are in place now are actually really built around helping reward clubs for the effort and the resources that they put themselves into players and the development of those players. And then I guess, create an economy where there's a financial gain and return for those clubs to be able to make that happen. And James touched on a really important point there as well around a loan process for players as well, which we currently don't see that, which causes issues for our squads and player point systems and all those sorts of things at the moment that currently exist. So it's a fantastic initiative and it's a very needed, I guess, movement for the game forward, particularly for our clubs at state level.
And that's the point, Ryan. If you're Brisbane Lions or Brisbane City, or any other club, Brisbane Strikers, who I used to play for, or Mount Gravatt also played for them as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And Bean Lee, by the way.
Don't think we started in Berserker, right?
Berserker up in Rockhampton, that's right. But if you're these clubs and you're going to invest in coaches, in technical directors, in strategy, you need to be rewarded through financial compensation when you develop players. And that's what we're going to do.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's about supporting the grassroots at the end of the day, isn't it? And then that's where the money can now go, is to invest back into that grassroots system so it can be, again, the return on investment becomes more out of that. So.
100%. We've been able to develop that here in Queensland with our NPL clubs and our club rating systems that have rewarded clubs for that. And we've found now we have, I guess, a number of paid staff in technical roles, particularly at those academy levels and where we sort of sit versus other states at the moment who may not actually have those sort of SAP directors and technical directors and those sorts of places filled by those qualified coaches who can deliver a really good product.
So how will this affect the Queensland competitions who are the Queensland clubs, who are in that higher part of the pyramid there? Will it see that they try and keep on to those players a little bit longer until they get a bigger transfer fee from that? Or how do you see that working out?
So if you look at Australia versus the other 210 countries across the world, and I can talk to this having overseen this when I was at FIFA, the time that players spend at clubs in Australia is some of the lowest in the world. You look at the A-League and you will see players who have played for 6 or 7 clubs around the A-League. This is not normal in world football. And what a transfer system will do, it will actually ensure that players spend longer periods at clubs. And we'll see that in the A-League, but we'll also see that outside of the A-League. And the reason why that's important, and there's many reasons. One is the connection with the clubs and like that. I'm going to park that for now.
Yeah.
But from a sporting and economical side, the longer that a player stays at the club, the better for the player, because the player will be developed by that club, but also the better for the club, because the transfer system will create value the longer that a player stays at the club. When the player moves, there'll be more compensation that comes back to the club that developed the player. So I think what we'll see as a result of this system concretely is you'll see players staying at clubs for longer periods. You'll see clubs investing more in youth development, and those that do the right thing will be rewarded financially.
Yeah, fantastic. Does this sort of work across the NPL clubs competitions as well? For example, Queensland to Victoria kind of thing. Will a club in Queensland want to hold on to their player a bit more because the Victorian clubs have to pay a bit more money for them now? Like, is that part of...
Absolutely it is, Cal. And you got to think about that, right? Because from our job as a government, as regulators, is to set rules that try to change behaviours. And we want to create tension and competition between clubs so that they keep players. And you can only do that if you regulate it.
Yeah.
And if there is tension and competition between clubs to go out and scout and recruit the best players, to develop the players, then ultimately what we'll get is we're going to get better players playing at state level, better players playing at national level, better players moving abroad, and better national teams.
Yeah. James is 100% right. We know it's been a thing for us over many years. The number of players who have gone to Victoria and to other parts of Asia and areas where they've been successful on the development, but the clubs here get left behind, I guess, in terms of what they've invested into that. So this is really incredible for our clubs, I guess, to be able to have that opportunity to know that they're investing in something that gets a return for them long term as well, which enables them to continue that cycle of building players and creating more and giving greater opportunity for them to continue on their football journey as they go.
Yeah, that's great. Another one of these big projects that you've recently come out, just like this month actually, the domestic club licensing regulations. Can you shed a bit of light as to what that's about and how that can shape the future for clubs into a national second division?
We've got a lot on the agenda at the moment,
We
right?
do, yeah.
But look,
Just a little bit going.
But this is a good thing, right? We're at a time as a sport where we've got people that want to make change. We're seeing the governance going on in Queensland. That's fantastic. But you've got people across the country that really want to drive change, and we need to drive change because we have challenges in the sport. The club licensing framework is different to a transfer system because ultimately it regulates club activities. Not only does it regulate club activities, it also is the backbone for future strategies for clubs. Because ultimately it's about standard setting for clubs in different areas, from administration to governance to finance to sporting. And you can set levels as competition administrators based on the strategy that you want to see rolled out across the country or across the state. For instance, as an administrator, if you want to focus on youth development, you set different criterias and different frameworks around youth development in order to continue participating in a competition. This is one positive element that you can have. The second one is it can be used as a guide for the club. So if a club wants to move throughout a pyramid, they need to know what they need to meet in order to move up. And that's important. And if you've got a licensing system, the gap sometimes isn't so bad, because you might have a club that says, well, we need to restructure ourselves as a membership-based club to more of an entity because we need to generate more revenues, and that's what we need to meet this next level. It's there, it's clear what you need to do to improve, and you can start benchmarking yourself as a club against other clubs outside of your state or even outside of your country if you plug into this broader system. So really what club licensing is at its very heart, it's about standards for clubs that are on one hand uniform across the country, but also specific to the region. It's there to benchmark so clubs can compare themselves to other clubs. It's about creating a central strategy where clubs can look at club licensing and say, well, this is our strategy now. This is how we grow. And ultimately, if we can give these tools to clubs, which is where all our player development happens, then we think it will be in the overall interest of the sport.
100%. This is a path that we've already commenced, I guess, as part of Football Queensland. We do have a licensing structure. There was one within NPL and QPL that existed for the past many years, but we've actually, I guess, extended that now with the connected pyramid that we have to enable, I guess, the FQPL 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 in South East and FQPL 3 up in the regions where we are, in order to be able to provide them a transparent list of things and the compliance list of things and what they need to work towards, I guess, to attain the level that they may choose to aspire to. It's not for every club to do that either. I think it gives clubs choice and it allows them to actually work towards a higher standard of where they want to be. They strategise, they budget, they do all those sorts of things to make sure that it's something that they're able to achieve and work towards. But I think it's sort of created an environment where clubs are in their own destiny now in terms of what they want to choose to do within the realms of their own sort of capabilities and financial structures and everything else as well. So it's something that we've sort of taken this journey in Queensland. It's fantastic that it's going to go more broadly and we look forward to taking it to an online process hopefully shortly as well to sort of make that a little bit simpler again for our clubs and volunteers out there as well.
Yeah, and so obviously the A-League clubs have to do this as well across the board, and the higher clubs in Queensland and other competitions around the state, it forms into the national second division as well. So that's just about setting the standards for what is needed to make that competition possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think any football fan, if they're reading between the lines at the moment, they see transfer systems starting, club licensing systems starting, and these have very specific objectives, but also what it does is it cultivates and creates an environment ripe for a second tier competition. So that is something that is on the cards at the moment. It's a discussion that is ongoing internally. It's a discussion that we're having with our member federations, but also with potential clubs themselves that could participate in a second tier. But it will happen. It will happen in time. What we're looking at right now is different models, different competition models, different governance structures, and also ways in which the business of the league can actually run and operate, because it needs to be sustainable. But what we would like to see in a not too distant future is a competition that is connected to the community, that is authentic and gives the football fan an authentic experience, and really one that is really focused on sporting merit. Because ultimately, if that's what your competition is focused on, you're going to create more surprise, more shock, more suspense, which brings people to stadiums because they want to watch exciting football.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
And it creates a great connection from the community to that level of football ultimately. So the kid playing mini roos on a Saturday morning wants to come back at 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the afternoon to watch the top team play, men's or women's, in something that's going to be able to give a pathway to them to be able to participate where they get to, versus going off to a rugby league game or an AFL game or something along those sort of lines. So it's really fantastic that we're heading towards that path and creating those opportunities for our youngsters and our juniors coming through.
Yeah. And that's really important, because if you look at the sports as a whole across the country, if you look at its key strength, it is community. Yep. It's our base.
Absolutely.
We're the biggest club sport, we're the most diverse, and we are growing. So to have a competition that is connected at the national level to our biggest strength is something that we need to do.
100%.
It's a very exciting project that I know that all of us here at Football Queensland are very much endorsing of. This has been sort of touted for quite a while, in back to sort of 2019, we've been really pushing it, but obviously with COVID being one of the main challenges, what other challenges have we faced in exploring this national second division model?
Look, there's a number of challenges. One is the calendar. That's always going to be difficult, because we've got this situation in Australia which is unique. Again, if we go back to the other 210 countries where your top tier national level competition plays at a different time of year to your community. Yeah. So that is a huge challenge, but we can also flip that around and say, well, yes, it's a challenge, but also it's an opportunity to have a second tier, because you can have in the near future a competition at national level that is connected to state-run competitions that would sit underneath, who are connected directly to the community, creating a pyramid. And that's something that is, I think, not just a challenge, but an opportunity for the sport.
Yeah. There are plenty of other things as well, just interstate travel as well. Is there any scope to bring in commercial partners to help assist that? Or will it possibly be, will we trial something alternative in as part of the process to get there, as like possibly like a Champions League model using the NPL as a base for that?
Yeah, look, there's a few different models that are on the table at the moment that are being discussed, but anyway, we land in the end, there needs to be a connection between the second tier and the NPLs. This has to happen, and that's going to create value for the NPLs as well, because ultimately that's your vehicle into a second tier, which means when you're running your final at an NPL level, that's going to be a vehicle to move up a pyramid. And that will create value for the competitions underneath, because it'll become more interesting, it'll be more meaningful, and there'll be something to play for. So yes, having Champions League structures, or structures where after the NPL finishes, there's a final series which ultimately filter into a second tier. This is where we see that there's a lot of value to explore.
Fantastic. Well, we're actually going to hit the pause button on this one. We're going to come back next week and have this as a part 1 episode. This episode will be out on Facebook, YouTube, on FQTV, and audially, or by audio on Spotify. So yeah, make sure you tune in for that one, and follow our platforms, follow us on our social media channels and our website, footballqueensland.com.au, so we can catch this episode as well. And then we'll catch up with you in a little bit to go through a few other things on the agenda. Thanks for watching.